In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to tell if your Kundalini has been activated. So first of all, what exactly is Kundalini? So Kundalini energy is the energy that's stored at the base of your spine, and it's a wound up energy. And so when you see statues in Egypt where they have the snake coming out right here, that's what it's representing. So the Kundalini energy is represented by snakes. And what the Kundalini energy does is it's dormant, and then when it awakens, the energy goes up all through your chakras, and the idea is that you will eventually become enlightened. However, the process is completely different for everybody else. Everybody, but I can just tell you what I experienced personally. But this energy begins a process, so it goes up through your chakras, and you have to work through those blocks that you have in your chakras before you, in theory, become enlightened. Now, I don't know, how many people actually become enlightened after this happens, but it does start that process so that you start to wake up and you start to, become more spiritually aware and grow as a person. So, for mine, how mine activated it was through a twin flame connection. So I will talk more about this in other videos, but basically I met somebody and I knew that they were spiritually awake, and one day I just kept on staring at them in their eye, and then that's when this process started for me. And so what happened first was I started to experience this buzzy feeling. I don't know how to explain it, but it was just kind of like I just kind of felt this kind of energy buzzing in me. And I also felt, for some odd reason, like I was energetically connected to him. So I just remember laying on my bed almost feeling like I was being pulled towards him. And to this day, I don't understand what that was about. And so the next thing that happened was I started to have this tingly sensation in my sacral chakra. And at the time, after this happened, I ended up finding someone who wrote about it, and they described it as champagne bubbles. And that's exactly what it felt like. And so then when it actually happened for me, I don't know, I couldn't sleep, and I got up and I went out into the living room and I laid down on the couch, and then I started to feel this energy unwind, and it felt very physical in my body. And again, I think everybody's experience may be different, but that's what I experienced. It felt like it was physically unwinding. And so the other odd thing about my experience was it was connected to a twin flame, and for whatever reason, I could sense his energy there, and I saw like this big image of him like on the ceiling, like his face. So again, I don't know what that was about, but somehow I knew that I was connected to him during this process. But it took me months, honestly, to figure out exactly what happened. So it unwound, and there is a kind of term that a lot of people refer to that experience as a kind of spirit gasm, because you just kind of feel this energy going through your body. So, like I said, that starts this process. So once your Kundalini is activated, it's a one-time thing. It's activated, and it's been activated. You're not going to have another one. So it's either on or off. And so for me, it was activated, and so that was it. I'm never going to experience that again. It was a one-time event. So I'm going to go through a list of the things that happened after this, and they're not in any type or particular order. So I'm just kind of going through what I remember experiencing. So one of the first things is I remember laying down on my bed, and I could just feel my heart just beat, like it was just so much more pronounced. And, now that I've been on the journey for a while, I know that that's just, a sign that you are kind of activating your heart chakra. And so it just, this energy as it goes up, it's going through your chakras. And so I could definitely feel it in my heart chakra. The other very significant and telltale sign is you start dreaming a lot about snakes. So snakes do represent Kundalini energy, and so you will see a lot of dreams show up with snakes in them. And what was so funny is I was thinking about making this video last night, and so I ended up having dreams about snakes. And another odd thing that I experienced that I have not heard very many people talk about this, is I started seeing this white and black cloud that looked like it was very connected in the center, and they are just swirling and swirling and swirling. And so the black and white cloud parts were kind of nebulous, but sometimes they would change shapes and they would kind of get more diffuse, but they were always very, very connected in the center. And then, so I would see that whenever I would close my eyes. And so to me, it was just, the vision of the kind of the yin and yang symbol, divine masculine, divine feminine energy. And I think it also just kind of triggered that recognition, I think, with me. And so I still see that on occasion. And then the other main thing that happened for me in particular was it ended up opening up my third eye. And there were so many different things associated with opening up my third eye that I will have to talk about all of that in different videos. But the main thing, the first thing that happened was I started hearing this static kind of noise where you would, it almost sounds like you're in between radio stations. So you can't quite hear what people are saying. It's just not, it's a little too fuzzy. I've heard a lot of people talk about it like you are hearing a TV that's very faint in another room. And another thing that happens is that you start to become more sensitive emotionally. And again, this is just, the energy's going through you and it's kind of opening you up. Things that you have suppressed, it's kind of bringing things up and you don't even necessarily know what the emotions are. But I have mentioned before that I remember waking up, just crying, and I don't remember what happened or what I was crying about. And another thing is you can start feeling heat in one specific location in your body, it's super hot. One time I can remember in particular was on the bottom of one of my feet, it was just super hot, and it's just one of those things that happens. And the biggest one is that you start to experience sleep disruption, and you can't go back to sleep, or of course you start waking up at 11:11, and that's exactly what would happen to me. I would look up, it's 11:11, and that was, I think, just the most bizarre thing, that every time I woke up it was 11:11. And another interesting thing that I found out later was during this time after that happened, I remember my sleep was so off. I would go started out in my bedroom, I would go into the living room, and then maybe I'd end up in the guest bedroom. But funny side note, at the time I did not know that there was a portal in my guest bedroom, and it was kind of like my third eye just opened, so I kind of walked into the hornet's nest basically, and I didn't know that. But the other thing is, what happens when your Kundalini is activated is that it shifts your energy so much higher that when you have a partner, your energy can be so different from them. It's almost like your energy cannot be with them in the same bed. And that was what happened to me, was that I just was I couldn't sleep. I'm I have to get out of this, I have to go sleep somewhere else. But I found that out later, and I thought that was very interesting because I had not heard of that. And the other thing that ties into that too is because your energy has been elevated, you will start to, be exposed to potentially beings in the other dimensions. It's like as soon as you have your Kundalini activated or wake up, you're like this flashing light. You're like, hey, guess what? There's somebody there that just had their Kundalini activated. So you stand out. And another one of the biggest things is your dreams start to become very pronounced, very vivid. You start processing a lot of this subconscious stuff, and a lot of it shows up through animal symbolism. And I will be doing different videos on all the different animals that you may encounter during this process. And another thing is, I had totally forgotten about this. I had to go back and look at my notes. I forgot about this. It's been 10 years, but one of the funniest things that happened was you can get very dysregulated energy. And I remember dancing 3 hours straight. It's like I couldn't stop. I just was like, I just had so much energy and I just had to get it out. I don't think that's recommended. I think you probably want to be grounded and try to regulate your energy. But I remember just like dancing, dancing, dancing. I had all this energy. I just danced like in one room. And then the next day, I was so tired and exhausted, I couldn't move. One other interesting thing that happens is you will start to become more sensitive to food. And in particular, you may start noticing, you can kind of taste the chemicals in foods. And one kind of funny thing, at the time I think I was drinking this type of margarita mix that afterwards I realized it had some sort of preservatives in it, and I never drank it after that. It's like there's something weird in this thing. I can't drink it. Another odd thing that I experienced, and I did also hear somebody else say something similar, so it's not just me, but I had this weird craving where I wanted to eat tuna fish every day for an entire week. And I heard somebody else say that, they crave sardines. So I'm not the only one. I don't know what that was about, but thank goodness it only lasted a week. And then the last thing I want to talk about was, and there is a term called a hypnic jerk, where your body jerks right as you're about to go to sleep. So that is a known thing. But this in particular, like, I'm aware of that, like, just as you're going off to sleep, it's kind of like, you just wake up real abruptly. But this is more like a cattle prod hitting you, because your body, like, lifts up off the bed. I mean, it is the wildest thing. And I had heard, people talk about Kundalini before, like, having jerky bodily movements. But that was one of the weirdest ones, where all of a sudden you're like being lifted up out of your bed and you have no control over it, and it is the wildest thing. So those are types of things that I experienced when my Kundalini was activated. Now, I will just say, I didn't have any kind of reference or anything to go on when this happened. And my knowledge of Kundalini was that I knew about it like a long time ago. Like, I remember when I was really, starting to get into spiritual topics in my early 20s, I remember learning about Kundalini, and I read about it, and I was gonna try to activate it. But then I remember reading something in the book that said, a lot of times the energy can go up too quickly, and people hear this whooshing sound, like this deafening whooshing sound, and then, it just becomes overwhelming. And that can happen. I mean, it can be an overwhelming process for a lot of people. And so, when it happened to me, even though I had heard and knew about Kundalini energy, I didn't really understand exactly that was what had happened. I think I started to realize that that's maybe what happened, but I think just because I was not aware exactly of what to expect, that I did not know exactly that's what it was. And also at the time, because it was activated by a twin flame, he was so much in my dreams at the time that I was kind of more focused on what is my connection with this person, because I did not understand why he kept on showing up in my dreams. And so there were dreams associated with him that were, that were kind of indicating that something was happening. At the time, I really didn't understand what the messages were. So because mine was connected to a twin flame, my activation may be a little different than what other people experience. But again, I did not have any kind of reference material or anything to go by when it happened to me. And I did end up writing a book, small plug, on my experience, because it's basically a compilation of a bunch of blog articles I wrote, explaining what happened to me, because I did not want other people to have to struggle so much the way that I did. And so I wrote that book to kind of help people through this process. So it kind of takes you through my experience and what I've kind of learned in a kind of organized manner. But when it happened to me, I did not have anything to go on. And I think the hardest thing for me for this whole thing, besides the fact that I knew that I had this odd connection to this person, I was trying to figure that out. For me, the biggest struggle was the psychic experiences that I started having. So when my Kundalini was activated, for that next year, I was like terrified to go to sleep at night. And it wasn't until I went through a kind of stressful event that my third eye kind of like calmed down and I got more grounded. And, so my psychic experiences are not as overwhelming to me, and also because I know more about what to experience and what these experiences are. But I will say it was very, very challenging at first, because, it's like you do hear that, people kind of like, go crazy or whatever if their third eye is opened. And it's because in our society, we haven't been trained, or it's not, well known or accepted that you could start hearing voices, and, you could start having different visions, you could start seeing different things. So I think that was the biggest challenge for me. But overall, I would say I'm much more grounded in the energy itself. I will say the only way, I don't know if I explained this or not. I don't know if I talked about a tingling sensation. One of the other symptoms I had was a tingling sensation on my scalp. I can't remember if I talked about that or not. But that was the weirdest thing. So it's like you kind of have, they're called like head tingles. Like, what is another word I've heard people call them? I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But it is a very, very weird sensation. It's almost like your scalp is kind of like moving, and it's like, what is happening? And it's usually on one side or the other. It's not the whole scalp, for me at least. And I would have that. That started early on, and to this day I still have that, and that's the only way that I know that my Kundalini is still active, because I can feel it. The only thing that I can think of is that that's just the energy going through, it's still kind of up in your crown chakra area. So that's it for me. So let me know in the comments if you think that you've had your Kundalini activated. And if so, tell me what kind of signs and symptoms that you had to let you know that your Kundalini was activated. So make sure to subscribe. I've got plenty of things to help you along in your spiritual journey. So stay tuned.